The late afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the cluttered table. I stood there, a towel draped over my shoulder, glancing at the clock. My son had been feeling overwhelmed lately, and I wanted to help him relax. It was during these moments that I felt most like a mother, caring, nurturing, and protective. "Hey, you want a massage?" I called to him from the other room. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he approached, and I could see the tension etched across his face. He nodded, a faint smile breaking through his weariness. I led him to the living room where soft light illuminated our worn couch. It held memories of family gatherings and lazy afternoons spent together. As he settled down, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was just a mother's concern for her son, nothing more. I placed my hands on his shoulders, feeling the taut muscles beneath my fingers. With each gentle stroke, I tried to ease away his stress while battling an unsettling awareness of how close we were physically. My mind drifted back to simpler times, when he was a little boy running around in the backyard, laughter spilling from his lips as he played with friends. "Remember when you used to climb that old oak tree?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. He chuckled softly. "Yeah, until Dad made me stop because he thought I'd fall." We shared a moment of laughter that felt both nostalgic and bittersweet. Yet as my hands continued their work on his back, memories morphed into something heavier, a mix of warmth and an unspoken longing that lingered just beneath the surface. "Things have been tough lately," he said quietly after a pause. His voice carried an undercurrent of vulnerability that tugged at me. I nodded, focusing on my movements as if they could somehow shield us both from what lay beneath our words. "You've got a lot on your plate," I replied gently. He sighed deeply, and in that sigh was an echo of all his struggles, the pressures of work, relationships left unresolved. My heart swelled with empathy. This was my son who needed me now more than ever. As I kneaded away at the knots in his shoulders, an unexpected wave of emotion washed over me. The closeness we shared felt profound yet fraught with complexity. How did it come to this? A simple act of care had transformed into something laden with unspoken desires and fears. "I'm here for you," I assured him softly as memories continued to swirl, his first steps, school days filled with pride and joy, and yet here we were in this moment where everything felt so fragile. Suddenly aware of how vulnerable we both were in this intimate space, I pulled back slightly but kept my hands resting on him for just a moment longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of our bond that seemed to deepen with each passing second. Then came the sound of keys jingling at the front door, a jarring reminder that our time was limited. My heart raced as I quickly withdrew my hands and stepped back just as my husband entered the room. "Hey. What's going on here?" he asked cheerfully but with curiosity etched across his face. I plastered on a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes while trying to shake off the weight of what had just transpired between us, my son still lying there relaxed but unaware of the turmoil brewing just beneath our surface interactions. "Just giving him a little massage," I replied nonchalantly as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. "Looks like he needs it," my husband said with a chuckle before turning toward our son who sat up slowly, stretching like a cat awakening from slumber. As they exchanged casual banter about plans for dinner or upcoming events in town, the local diner's pancake breakfast looming large in everyone's mind, I found myself retreating into thoughts filled with uncertainty about what lay ahead for us both. The moment had passed too quickly, reality crashed back around me like waves against rocks, a reminder that no matter how close we grew in those fleeting minutes alone together, boundaries existed for reasons steeped in societal norms and expectations that weighed heavily upon us all. With dinner preparations underway and conversation flowing freely around me once more, I couldn't shake off how different things felt now between us. How much had shifted beneath layers of familial love mingled with hidden complexities waiting patiently beneath every glance exchanged or silence shared between mother and son alike. I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, while my mind replayed the moments from earlier. The warmth of my son's skin under my hands lingered, a memory etched in my thoughts. I could hear his laughter from the living room as he chatted with a friend on the phone, the sound mixing with the faint aroma of garlic and onions sizzling in the pan. Yet, amidst this normalcy, an unshakable tension hung in the air. As I stirred the pot, I caught glimpses of him through the doorway. He was leaning against the wall, relaxed and carefree, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Every time our eyes met, I felt a jolt of something forbidden, a reminder of how close we had come to crossing an invisible line. The kiss, brief and unexpected, had shifted everything between us. It was as if a door had been cracked open to reveal emotions we had both kept tightly shut. "Dinner smells great," he called out casually, breaking my reverie. "Just trying to make something special," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "How was your day?" "Not bad. Just finished up some work for school." He paused for a moment before adding, "You know I appreciate you helping me out." The sincerity in his voice tugged at my heartstrings. I wanted to tell him how much I appreciated him too, how proud I was, but those words felt loaded now. Instead, I focused on stirring the sauce more vigorously than necessary. With dinner finally ready and plates set on the table, we sat down together. Conversation flowed easily at first. We discussed his classes and upcoming projects while trying to ignore the elephant in the room that loomed larger with each passing moment. "Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation?" I asked cautiously. "I'm still figuring it out," he replied thoughtfully. "There's so much pressure these days." His words resonated with me deeply. I understood that pressure all too well. As he spoke about his uncertainties, I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort him, to bridge that gap between mother and son that had somehow become more complex than it ever should have been. After dinner, he helped me clear the table. We worked side by side in silence until our shoulders brushed against each other while reaching for a plate at the same time. A spark ignited at that moment, a reminder of our earlier closeness, and it sent shivers down my spine. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, stepping back as if stung by electricity. "No need to apologize," I responded softly, but my heart raced as I struggled to maintain composure. He looked at me then, really looked, his gaze searching mine for answers we both knew were unanswerable. The silence stretched between us like an elastic band ready to snap at any moment. "I should probably get back to studying," he finally said, breaking away from our shared moment and retreating into his room. As soon as he left the kitchen, reality crashed back in full force. The weight of what had happened pressed heavily upon me, guilt mingled with longing in a way that felt suffocating. How could one simple touch unravel everything? How could something meant to convey care morph into something so much more? I found myself wandering into his room later that evening under some pretense of checking on him. He was sprawled across his bed with textbooks scattered around him, a stark contrast to how carefree he had seemed only hours before. "Hey," I said tentatively as I leaned against the doorframe. "Hey," he replied without looking up from his notes. I stepped further inside, drawn by an invisible thread that seemed to pull us closer together despite all reason telling me otherwise. "Need any help?" He sighed and finally looked up at me with those familiar eyes filled with uncertainty and vulnerability, the very same eyes that had once looked up at me for guidance when he was just a child. "I don't know if it's worth it," he confessed quietly after a long pause. "What do you mean?" My heart sank, there was so much unsaid between us now. This whole future thing. Sometimes it feels overwhelming. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration before continuing hesitantly. "And sometimes it feels like no one really gets it." I moved closer instinctively as if wanting to shield him from those fears, those burdens weighing down on him like stones tied around his ankles pulling him underwater where no light could reach him. "We'll figure it out together," I promised softly without thinking about how those words might carry deeper implications now than they ever had before. As if drawn by some magnetic force beyond our control, we gravitated toward each other until there were mere inches separating us once again, the air thick with tension and unspoken words hanging heavily between us like fog obscuring clarity from view. In an impulsive moment fueled by emotion rather than logic or reason, I leaned forward slightly while holding his gaze steady, and before either of us could retreat back into safer territory, we kissed. The sensation sent shockwaves through both our bodies. Warmth flooded over me as time seemed to stand still for just one breathless heartbeat. A collision of longing and confusion crashing together like waves against rocks until reality rushed back and uninvited once more forcing us apart again as if someone had flipped a switch turning off whatever connection we'd briefly shared just moments ago. What just happened? His voice trembled slightly. Confusion clouded his features, mirroring my own inner turmoil perfectly reflected back at me through those familiar eyes now filled with questions neither of us dared articulate aloud yet again tonight, or perhaps ever again, for fear of what lay beyond this fragile boundary we'd crossed willingly but never intended upon crossing at all. I don't know, my voice faltered. Panic began creeping into every corner of my mind, threatening chaos where order once reigned supreme amongst motherly love mingling dangerously close alongside desires best left untouched forevermore. We stood there staring at each other wide-eyed like deer caught in headlights, unable, or unwilling, to move forward or backward, caught forever within this liminal space suspended between innocence lost and newfound awareness gained amidst shadows cast long across our lives, intertwined within familial bonds now tinged ever so slightly darker than they'd ever been before. And then came footsteps echoing down the hallway, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching home unexpectedly, cutting sharply through our fragile bubble, reminding us all too well how precarious this situation truly was. The footsteps grew louder, each step a reminder of the world outside our fragile moment. My heart raced as I instinctively took a step back, breaking the spell that had woven itself around us. The warmth of his presence lingered, but the reality of our situation crashed down like an unwelcome wave. I glanced at him, searching for answers in his wide eyes, which mirrored my own confusion and fear. "Mom?" His voice was barely above a whisper, filled with uncertainty. I shook my head slightly, urging him to stay quiet. The last thing we needed was to draw attention to ourselves. My mind raced through the implications of what had just happened between us, the kiss that felt both forbidden and inevitable. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and I held my breath, caught in a moment that felt like an eternity. The familiar creak of the floorboards announced my husband's arrival home from work. I could hear him call out for me, his voice echoing through the hallway as if it were taunting us. "Are you here?" he asked casually, unaware of the tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I shot my son a look that conveyed urgency and panic all at once. We needed to act normal, whatever normal meant now, but how could we? The boundaries we had once taken for granted were now blurred beyond recognition. "I'm in the living room," I called back, forcing a calmness into my voice that I didn't feel. My son nodded silently and stepped toward the door, his expression still fraught with confusion. Just as he reached for the handle, I grabbed his arm gently but firmly. "Wait," I whispered urgently. "Let me go first." He hesitated but then nodded again as if understanding the need for discretion. I opened the door slowly and stepped into our home's familiar chaos, a place filled with reminders of family dinners and laughter that now felt tainted by unspoken truths. "Hey there," I said brightly, plastering on a smile as my husband walked into view. He looked tired but content, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass mixed with faint traces of engine oil from his day at work. "Long day?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe with an easy grin. "Just busy," I replied, trying to keep my tone light while suppressing everything else swirling inside me. He stepped further into the room and noticed our son standing awkwardly by the couch. "What are you two up to?" "Just talking," I said quickly, hoping it sounded innocent enough. My husband raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, He moved toward me and placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to reassure but only served to heighten my anxiety. It was as if every touch now came with layers of meaning that hadn't existed before. "I picked up some dinner on the way home," he said cheerfully. "Thought we could have a family night." The words settled heavily in the air between us. They felt like an anchor pulling me away from where I wanted to be, where things had shifted so dramatically only moments ago. "Sounds great," our son chimed in too quickly, breaking his silence as he attempted to mask his own discomfort. As we gathered around the table for dinner, laughter echoed through our small home, the kind of laughter that used to come easily before everything changed between us. My husband shared stories from work while our son occasionally chimed in with witty remarks or nods of agreement. But beneath it all lay an undercurrent of tension that neither could see but both could feel, the unacknowledged distance growing silently between us. I caught myself stealing glances at my son when I thought no one was watching. His hands resting on the table reminded me of how they had felt against mine just moments earlier during our intimate exchange. Our lips met so unexpectedly, it was still fresh in my mind, a memory both beautiful and haunting wrapped up in guilt and longing. After dinner ended with half-hearted attempts at dessert, chocolate cake untouched, I excused myself under the pretense of cleaning up while they settled into their usual routines, my husband retreating into his evening news and our son heading upstairs to unwind after a long day. In solitude, now surrounded by dishes piled high in sudsy water, thoughts swirled chaotically around what had transpired earlier, a mix of regret and desire clashing violently within me. How had we crossed this line? And more importantly, what did it mean for us moving forward? There was something about being physically close that ignited feelings long buried beneath layers of maternal instinct and societal expectations, something so powerful yet terrifyingly taboo that it left me questioning everything about who we were. Mother and son bound by blood yet suddenly tangled in emotions neither fully understood nor knew how to navigate. As if sensing my turmoil from upstairs, footsteps descended slowly down toward me again, this time lighter but still heavy with unspoken words hanging thickly in the air around us. "What's going on?" Our son's voice broke through my thoughts unexpectedly as he appeared in view once more. Uncertainty etched across his face mirrored what swirled within me too closely for comfort. I turned off the water abruptly, droplets splashed onto tiles beneath us as silence enveloped us like fog rolling over fields at dawn, thickening every heartbeat until clarity seemed impossible amidst chaos brewing beneath surface appearances we both worked hard to maintain intact despite everything shifting beneath our feet ever since those fateful moments earlier today. "I don't know," I admitted finally after what felt like ages lost between breaths shared only moments before, the weight heavier than any dish left undone behind me now. Before he could respond or perhaps pull away again into retreating silence where safety lay hidden behind walls built high against vulnerability exposed too raw too soon. A sudden noise shattered whatever fragile connection remained between us, a loud thud echoing through hallways followed by muffled voices drifting closer. My heart sank further down into depths unknown, the reality crashing down once more reminding us all too well just how precarious this situation truly was. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. I sat on the edge of the couch, my mind racing as I replayed the events of the previous night. The kiss lingered in my thoughts, a whirlwind of emotions swirling around me. I had spent so many years defining my role as a mother, and now everything felt turned upside down. I glanced toward the kitchen, where the smell of coffee wafted through the air. My husband would be up soon, and I needed to gather my thoughts before he arrived. The reality of our situation pressed heavily on my chest. How could I face him knowing what had transpired? As I sipped my coffee, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a rush of anxiety. It was too early for visitors. With cautious steps, I approached and opened the door to find an old family friend standing there with Diane, her smile bright but eyes curious. "Good morning. Hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said cheerfully. Not at all, I replied, forcing a smile as I stepped aside to let her in. Diane had always been like family, she was a comforting presence in our small town. But today, her visit felt intrusive. As we settled into conversation over coffee, she began to notice something off about me. "You seem a bit distant," she remarked lightly. "Everything all right?" I nodded quickly, avoiding her gaze. "Just tired from a long week." Her expression shifted slightly, concern creeping into her features. "You know you can talk to me if something's bothering you." I wanted to tell her everything, the confusion, the guilt, but words were trapped in my throat. Instead, we chatted about mundane topics, local events and community gossip. Each laugh felt strained as Diane's eyes seemed to search for something deeper beneath my facade. After some time, she finally stood up to leave. "Take care of yourself," she said softly before walking out the door. Once alone again, I sank back into the couch with a heavy sigh. The morning had slipped away too quickly. I could feel time pressing down on me like an unyielding weight. Later that afternoon, as shadows grew longer outside our windows, my son returned home from work earlier than usual. His presence filled the house with warmth that both comforted and unsettled me. He dropped his bag by the door and walked into the living room with an easy smile that made my heart race. "Hey Mom. How was your day?" he asked casually. "It was fine," I replied too quickly, feeling my cheeks flush under his gaze. He settled onto the couch beside me but maintained an innocent distance that felt charged with unspoken tension. We exchanged small talk about his job and plans for the weekend, normal conversation that felt increasingly surreal given our recent connection. As evening approached and dinner preparations began, we worked side by side in comfortable silence until he turned to me suddenly with an earnest look in his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. My stomach churned at his words, they carried weight beyond their simplicity. "Of course," I managed to say while bracing myself for whatever might come next. We moved to the dining table where he leaned forward slightly as if sharing a secret between us alone. "About last night, it's been on my mind." A knot formed in my throat as memories flooded back, the electric moment when our lips met, now looming large between us like an uninvited guest at dinner. "I know it was unexpected," he continued cautiously. "But it felt real." His honesty struck me deeply. It echoed what had been circling in my own mind since then, an undeniable bond forged through vulnerability and shared experiences that transcended mere familial love. "I don't know how to handle this," I confessed quietly, feeling raw exposure wash over me again. He nodded slowly as if understanding far more than we dared articulate aloud together at that moment, a silent agreement binding us tighter amidst confusion and fear of societal judgment looming beyond our walls. We spent hours talking through dinner, laughter mingled with heavier discussions about boundaries blurred by emotions neither of us fully understood yet wanted desperately to explore further without losing ourselves completely in its depths. As night fell outside and stars twinkled overhead like distant dreams waiting just out of reach, we spent the night together, sharing stories until sleep finally claimed us both on opposite ends of our cozy living room couch. A thin blanket draped over two hearts beating within proximity yet divided by invisible lines drawn by convention itself. Morning light crept back into view far too soon for comfort, the harsh reality returning like an unwelcome visitor knocking at dawn's door once again reminding us all how fragile these moments truly were, and how easily they could slip away if we weren't careful enough not to lose ourselves along this treacherous path ahead. Just then came another knock, this time louder than before, shattering whatever fragile peace remained inside these walls. The knock echoed through the house, a stark reminder that reality was waiting outside the fragile bubble I had created with my son. My heart raced, and I could feel the tension creeping back into my shoulders. I took a moment to steady myself, inhaling deeply as I glanced at the clock. It was too early for visitors, especially on a Sunday morning. "Mom," my son's voice called from the other room, tinged with curiosity. Are you okay? I forced a smile, though it felt strained. Just a minute, I replied, trying to sound cheerful. The warmth of our previous night lingered in my mind, a bittersweet memory that now felt like an anchor pulling me down into murky waters. As I opened the door to face whoever was on the other side, I found myself face to face with an old friend from the neighborhood, Maggie, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes sharp and observant. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said with a hint of suspicion. No, not at all, I said too quickly. Just enjoying some quiet time. Maggie stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the cluttered living room. You've been quieter than usual lately. Everything all right? Her question hung in the air like an uninvited guest. I could feel my cheeks flush under her scrutiny. Just busy with work and life, I managed to say. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she settled onto the couch, her posture relaxed yet watchful. You know how it is in this town, everyone notices when someone changes. I nodded absently, feeling exposed under her gaze. The community was small, everyone knew each other's business, or thought they did. My heart raced again as I considered how much had changed for me recently and how easily it could be discovered. Your son seems different too, Maggie continued, her tone casual but probing. He's been coming around more often. Yes, I replied carefully, choosing my words with precision. He's just been going through some things. Maggie's eyes narrowed slightly as she leaned forward. You two are very close these days. I felt a chill run down my spine at her implication. Our bond had deepened in ways that were difficult to articulate without crossing lines better left unspoken. We're just supporting each other, I said flatly. Maggie studied me for a moment longer before changing topics, but the unease lingered like an unwanted shadow in the back of my mind. Later that day, as preparations for the community festival began to fill our small town with excitement and noise, I found myself lost in thought while arranging decorations at the local park, a vibrant hub bustling with laughter and chatter from families enjoying their day together. The festival was always a highlight of summer. Children ran around playing games while vendors hawked homemade goods and local crafts under colorful tents fluttering in the gentle breeze. Yet amidst this joyful chaos, there was an unsettling undercurrent tugging at me, a constant reminder of what lay beneath my surface interactions. I spotted him across the park, my son, laughing with friends near one of the booths selling cotton candy and lemonade. His smile lit up his face in a way that made my heart swell with pride yet ache with something deeper that simmered just beneath it all. Hey there, he called out cheerfully as he approached me after grabbing a treat from one of his friends. Looks like you're having fun, I said lightly, attempting to match his energy while suppressing thoughts that felt too heavy for this setting. Yeah. Just hanging out. He took a bite of his cotton candy and grinned at me before glancing around nervously as if he sensed something unsaid lingering between us. Good, I replied softly but firmly, an attempt to reinforce boundaries that seemed increasingly difficult to maintain. As we walked through the festival together, sharing moments of laughter and light conversation about trivial things, the weather or upcoming school events, I couldn't shake off Maggie's earlier words echoing in my head. Everyone notices when someone changes. The sun began to set behind us. Golden light bathed everything in warmth as twilight crept closer, the perfect backdrop for memories being made yet also for secrets being kept hidden away from prying eyes. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed by everything swirling within me, the guilt mixed with longing, I excused myself to grab some water at one of the booths nearby while searching for clarity amidst this chaotic atmosphere filled with joy around us. As I stood waiting for my drink, an old acquaintance approached, a woman named Linda who had known our family for years but hadn't been around much lately due to personal matters of her own. Hey there! Long time no see, she exclaimed brightly before lowering her voice conspiratorially as if sharing gossip only meant for close friends' ears. I've heard whispers about you two lately. My stomach dropped at her words, instinctively bracing myself against what might come next, fears bubbling up inside like boiling water threatening to overflow its pot if left unattended any longer. "What do you mean?" My voice came out steadier than I felt inside, however much composure remained wavered precariously on a tightrope stretched thin above uncertain ground below me. "Oh, nothing serious. Just people talking about how close you've become since he moved back home." She smiled knowingly but didn't elaborate further, her eyes glinting mischievously as though she had uncovered some grand secret hidden away beneath layers of ordinary life we all presented outwardly every day without fail despite all else going on behind closed doors. With every word spoken by Linda, or anyone else, I found myself questioning whether it was truly possible to keep everything hidden any longer without consequences looming ahead like dark clouds ready to unleash their storm upon unsuspecting souls caught unaware beneath their weighty presence. As night fell over our small town wrapped tightly within its comforting embrace filled with laughter echoing throughout streets alive once more under twinkling stars overhead, I wondered if maybe it wouldn't be long before those whispers turned into something much louder. Something impossible for either one of us ever escape entirely no matter how hard we tried. The weight of the day pressed down on me as I sat in the dim light of our living room, the shadows stretching long across the floor. My heart raced at the thought of confronting my feelings head-on. The events of the past few weeks had tangled my emotions into a knot I could no longer ignore. My son, with his youthful energy and vulnerability, had become more than just a child to me. He was a reflection of everything I had cherished and feared. A knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. It was my husband, returning from work earlier than expected. His voice carried through the house, filled with warmth as he greeted our son in the kitchen. I felt a pang of guilt wash over me, a reminder that my internal battle was not just mine alone to bear. The reality of our family dynamic loomed large, casting a shadow over my burgeoning feelings. "Hey, how was your day?" I heard him ask our son. "It was fine," he replied, but there was an underlying tension in his voice that only I could sense. I wondered if he felt it too, the unspoken connection that had grown between us, like an invisible thread binding our souls together. As they chatted about mundane topics, work, school projects, I found myself retreating further into my thoughts. A family crisis had erupted recently when my husband lost his job unexpectedly. It had put additional pressure on all of us, forcing us into tighter quarters emotionally and physically. We were navigating uncharted waters together, and it seemed to draw my son and me closer in ways that made me uneasy. I caught glimpses of him as he moved about the kitchen, his form familiar yet foreign to me now. Each moment spent together felt charged with unacknowledged tension, a silent understanding that simmered just below the surface. My husband's laughter echoed through the house, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing within me. When dinner was finally ready, we gathered around the table, a familiar ritual that felt strangely different this time. My husband praised our son for his recent accomplishments at school, highlighting his growth and maturity. "You've really come into your own," he said proudly. The words hung in the air like a double-edged sword. I glanced at our son's face as he absorbed his father's praise. There was something in his expression that tugged at my heartstrings, a mix of pride and uncertainty that mirrored my own internal conflict. How could I reconcile these feelings? How could I possibly navigate this tangled web without causing irreparable harm? As we ate in relative silence punctuated only by clinking silverware and occasional comments about food preferences, I felt increasingly restless. My mind drifted back to those moments shared between my son and me, those fleeting touches during massages or shared laughter during quiet evenings alone together. After dinner, while my husband cleared the table and washed dishes, a mundane task that seemed to stretch on forever, I found myself gravitating toward our living room again where remnants of our earlier conversations lingered in the air like ghosts refusing to fade away completely. My son joined me on the couch after some time. We sat side by side but worlds apart emotionally. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, concern etched across his features. Just thinking, I replied non-committally as I stared blankly at nothing in particular. About what? His tone held an edge of curiosity mixed with apprehension. I hesitated before answering. Every word felt weighted with significance. About us, about everything. He shifted slightly closer as if drawn by an unseen force, an instinctual understanding passing between us without needing clarification or validation from anyone else. Things have been different lately, he murmured cautiously. There was an openness in his voice that both excited and terrified me all at once. Yes, I agreed quietly but firmly. The acknowledgement hung heavy between us like an unspoken promise waiting to be fulfilled or shattered depending on how we chose to move forward from this moment onward. The clock ticked rhythmically on the wall behind us, a reminder that time continued its relentless march forward while we remained suspended within this fragile bubble filled with both fear and hope alike. Then came another knock, this time louder than before, cutting through our fragile moment like a knife slicing through silk fabric. My heart sank instinctively as dread pooled within me because deep down inside I knew who it would be, Linda, the neighbor who always seemed to pop up unexpectedly when things were most precarious for us all. Hey! Is everyone home? Her cheerful voice rang out from beyond the door, oblivious to everything swirling beneath its surface just moments before her arrival disrupted everything yet again. I exchanged glances with my son, a silent agreement passed between us acknowledging how little control we truly had over circumstances beyond our immediate reach despite desperately wanting things differently right now. Just a minute. I called out hesitantly while rising slowly from my seat. Every step toward the door felt laden with uncertainty as if crossing some invisible threshold into unknown territory where consequences awaited around every corner. As I opened it wide enough for Linda's bright smile to shine through like sunlight breaking upon dark clouds overhead, I couldn't shake off feeling something monumental shifted within those walls just moments before her arrival shattered whatever tenuous connection existed between us still intact until then. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything," she exclaimed cheerfully stepping inside without invitation, the very essence of disruption itself unwittingly bringing chaos along with her presence. My heart raced anew, not just from her unexpected visit but also from knowing full well how much longer we could maintain this facade without risking everything we held dear if truth ever surfaced unbidden. In that instant standing there trapped between two worlds, my family life alongside secret desires hidden beneath layers upon layers waiting patiently for acknowledgement, I questioned whether it would ever be possible for any of us truly escape unscathed. The afternoon sun poured through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow that felt almost mocking in its brightness. I busied myself with the dishes, my mind racing. The old photograph I had found earlier lay on the table, a snapshot of happier times when everything seemed simpler. My son, grinning widely at a birthday party, surrounded by friends and cake. It was a moment frozen in time, yet it stirred a tempest of emotions within me. I could hear him in the next room, playing video games with friends. Laughter erupted occasionally, and for a fleeting moment, I longed to join them. But the weight of our recent interactions loomed large over me. Each touch during those massages had ignited something deep within, something that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As I scrubbed a stubborn spot on a plate, my thoughts drifted back to the neighbor's comment from yesterday at the diner. "You two are so close," she had said with an approving smile. "It's lovely to see such strong family ties." The way she said it made my heart sink. Did everyone notice? Did they see what I was trying so hard to hide? I set down the plate and wiped my hands on a towel. The weight of secrecy pressed heavily on my chest. It was one thing to feel these emotions, it was another entirely to know that others might suspect something deeper between us. Just then, the front door creaked open, and my husband stepped inside. He greeted me with his usual warmth, but paused as he caught sight of the photo on the table. "Oh, look at this," he exclaimed, picking it up and examining it closely. "Yeah," I replied flatly, feeling exposed under his gaze. You remember this day? He was so excited about that game, he continued nostalgically. Yes, I managed to say, forcing a smile as memories flooded back, a simpler time before everything became complicated. My husband's eyes sparkled with fondness as he reminisced about our son's childhood antics. He's grown up so fast, he remarked, placing the photo back down gently. Too fast, I echoed quietly, my heart heavy with unspoken truths. He glanced toward the living room where our son was still immersed in his game. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've noticed how close you two have become lately. There was an edge to his voice that made me wary. Close? I asked cautiously, trying to read his expression for any hint of suspicion. Yeah, he continued slowly. It's nice, just don't forget about your own life too. His words hung in the air like an uninvited guest at a party. Did he sense something? Or was it just his way of expressing concern for both of us? I won't forget, I promised softly, though part of me felt like I was already losing myself in this tangled web we were weaving together. He moved past me toward the kitchen counter and began rummaging through some papers left there from earlier in the week. As he did so, my thoughts drifted back to my son again, how each moment spent together seemed charged with an intensity that felt almost forbidden now. A sudden burst of laughter from the living room jolted me back to reality. It reminded me that life continued outside these walls, a life filled with laughter and joy that didn't need to carry such heavy burdens. My husband turned around suddenly as if sensing my distraction. What are you thinking about? His eyes searched mine for answers hidden beneath layers of uncertainty. Just life, I replied vaguely, hoping it would suffice without revealing too much. Before he could probe further, our son entered the kitchen with an energy that filled every corner of the room like sunlight breaking through clouds after rain. Hey Mom! You should come watch this level, I finally beat it. His excitement was contagious, it brought a smile to my face despite everything swirling within me. Sure. Just give me a minute, I responded warmly as he dashed back into the living room again. As soon as he left us alone again, tension returned like an unwelcome shadow creeping back into our conversation. My husband resumed his search through papers while I busied myself straightening up, anything to avoid having to confront what lay beneath our surface interactions. Moments later though, before either of us could find words, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, an intrusion into our fragile moment of normalcy. I'll get it. Our son called out cheerfully from across the house before we could stop him. The door opened wide enough for their laughter to spill into every room like confetti at a celebration, a group of friends arriving just when we least needed distractions but perhaps exactly when we needed them most too. I stood frozen for a heartbeat until curiosity got the better of me. I edged toward where they gathered near the entranceway just beyond sightlines from where I stood still by instinct alone now. Watching them interact brought forth bittersweet feelings. Their camaraderie reminded me how innocent days once were before complications seeped into every interaction between us now. But then something shifted, their voices grew louder as they began discussing plans for later tonight, a gathering at one friend's house without parents around. That sounds fun. Our son exclaimed enthusiastically as they plotted details together while laughter erupted anew among them all. Yet even amidst their joy-filled chatter surrounding him, I couldn't shake off nagging doubts creeping closer. What would happen if anyone discovered what had been quietly brewing beneath our shared moments? As if reading my mind somehow through instinct or intuition alone, my husband approached quietly beside me now, his presence grounding yet unsettling all at once. We should probably check on dinner soon, he suggested casually, but there was something deeper lurking behind those words too. Before either one could say anything more profound than mere pleasantries, the door swung open wider, revealing not just friends but also unexpected guests arriving en masse now, from every direction, threatening boundaries we thought remained intact until this very moment. And just then, to add fuel onto flames already growing wild within us, all those familiar faces stepped inside carrying lightheartedness along with them. But little did they know how fragile everything truly remained beneath layers hidden away, still yearning for acknowledgement. The room filled with laughter and chatter, drowning out the unspoken tension that hung between my son and me. I stood frozen, caught in a moment where everything I had been grappling with threatened to spill over like a pot left too long on the stove. The familiar faces of friends and neighbors, all oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, filled our living room. "Hey there. We thought we'd drop by," one of them called cheerfully, stepping inside with a plate of cookies. The smell wafted through the air, mingling with the remnants of our earlier intimacy. I forced a smile, my heart racing as I glanced at my son. He returned my gaze with an expression that mirrored my own turmoil, a mixture of confusion and longing. "Yeah, good to see you," he managed to reply, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. The usual warmth of these gatherings felt stifling now, like an ill-fitting coat that reminded me of all that was wrong beneath its surface. As more friends entered, their laughter echoed through the house, filling spaces that had once felt sacred between us. I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to create distance while failing to escape the weight of what had transpired moments before. I could hear snippets of conversation, our neighbors discussing their children's milestones, recounting funny stories from last summer's fair, but all I could think about was how different everything felt now. I caught sight of my husband entering through the hallway. His presence was like a cold breeze cutting through a warm room. "What's all this?" he asked lightly but with an edge that suggested he sensed something amiss. "Just a little gathering," I replied too quickly, trying to maintain an air of normalcy. My heart sank as he approached me, wrapping his arm around my shoulder in a gesture meant to be reassuring but only served to heighten my anxiety. He leaned in closer and whispered just for me, "You've been distant lately." His words were heavy with implication. "Is everything okay?" I forced a laugh, too bright and too false, and nodded as if it were nothing more than a fleeting thought. "Of course. Just busy with work and life." Meanwhile, my son stood nearby, listening intently as if he were hanging on to every word exchanged between us. The tension was palpable. It felt as though we were all actors playing parts in a tragic play where no one knew their lines. The conversations swirled around me like leaves caught in an autumn wind, beautiful yet chaotic, and I found myself retreating further into my thoughts. How had we arrived at this point? A simple act of care had spiraled into something far more complex than I could have ever anticipated. As laughter erupted again from our guests, I caught my son's eye across the room. There was something unspoken there, a shared understanding that transcended words but threatened to unravel everything if acknowledged aloud. Then came an unexpected moment when our neighbor turned towards us with a curious expression. "You two are so close," she remarked casually but loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's nice to see such strong family bonds." My stomach twisted at her words. They felt like daggers aimed straight at what we were trying so desperately to hide. My husband chuckled lightly but didn't comment further. Instead, he squeezed my shoulder tighter as if sensing my discomfort. "Yeah," my son replied slowly, his eyes darting between us before settling on me again. "We've always been close." The implication hung heavy in the air, too heavy for any casual gathering among friends, and I could feel every eye upon us now as though they were searching for signs of something deeper lurking beneath our familial facade. Just then, another friend chimed in enthusiastically about some community event coming up next week, the annual Harvest Festival. And suddenly everyone shifted focus away from us toward this new topic that seemed innocuous enough but served only as a distraction from what had just transpired moments ago. I breathed deeply and attempted to engage in their conversation while internally battling against waves of guilt crashing over me like relentless tides threatening to pull me under completely. Minutes passed like hours until finally, thankfully, the doorbell rang again, signaling yet another arrival who promptly burst into our space with exuberance that cut through the thick atmosphere lingering over us. "Sorry we're late," she exclaimed cheerfully while juggling bags filled with goodies for everyone present. an innocent diversion from reality that brought smiles back onto faces momentarily dulled by unspoken truths. As laughter resumed and conversations flowed more freely again, I couldn't help but steal glances toward my son who stood quietly against the wall observing it all unfold before him, his expression unreadable yet deeply contemplative. And then suddenly, I felt it, the unmistakable shift within him as he pushed off from where he leaned against the wall and made his way toward me through throngs of people still chatting animatedly about nothing important at all. "Mom," he said softly once close enough for only me to hear above ambient noise surrounding us now. The world around faded slightly into background noise. It was just him and me standing there amidst chaos swirling beyond our bubble, a moment suspended in time where everything else ceased existing outside this fragile connection we shared. "What is it?" My voice barely rose above whispers shared amongst friends who remained blissfully unaware of what lay beneath layers carefully constructed over years spent together as family members bound by love yet silently shackled by societal expectations demanding conformity instead. "I need you to know something," he continued quietly while glancing back towards where others gathered nearby before leaning closer still so only I could hear him clearly without interruption. But before he could finish whatever confession lingered on his lips, the front door swung open wide once again revealing none other than my husband who stepped inside carrying 2 large bags filled with groceries along with an air of nonchalance masking tension simmering just below surface. His eyes scanned room quickly taking note first then lingering longer upon our faces, his gaze shifting between mine and our son's before settling back onto mine fully aware something significant loomed just beyond reach waiting patiently for acknowledgement. In that instant, I understood everything would change forever depending on how this moment unfolded next, yet uncertainty gripped tightly around heart like chains refusing release even though clarity beckoned invitingly forward urging action rather than hesitation. And so, I stood there frozen amidst chaos swirling around us, the weight of choices pressing down heavily upon shoulders burdened already by secrets kept far too long waiting patiently now for reckoning promised soon enough.